People, today is Tuesday, and this is just an introductory video about the Book of Job study that I'm beginning. So, if you're familiar with the Book of Job, you know it's maybe a heavy topic. I encourage you not to shrink back from this topic because, it's an incredible source of encouragement and insight, and I would say really inspiration. So the New Testament writer James said that his takeaway from the book of Job was that it was about perseverance. I don't believe that's the only thing. There are a lot of riches there. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the text and then just share some things that will hopefully be helpful. So I'm reading from a translation that I like a lot. It's called the Berean Standard Bible Translation. By the way, if you're not familiar with the book of Job, basically it is considered by many scholars to be the oldest book in the Old Testament, therefore the oldest book in the Bible, Hebrew Christian Bible. And so it is thought that Job was lived around perhaps the time of Abraham, the father of the faith, he's called, and really actually admired by, really exalted in many religions. There's the Christian faith, there's the Muslim faith, and then the Jewish faith. They all greatly admire Abraham. And so supposedly Job lived around that time, it's estimated. So I'm just going to dive in and share a few things. And yes, I am going to go through this whole book. So these will be brief videos. So there was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And this man was blameless and upright, fearing God and shunning evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large number of servants. Job was the greatest man of all the people of the East. Just a quick point about this. The land of Uz. It is uncertain where this was, but it's thought to be somewhere around current day Jordan, Saudi Arabia, or perhaps let's see, I think around south of Damascus. So it was possibly kind of like a frontier land where it was where the desert met sown land, so you'd have some agriculture. And as we'll see here, as we see in the text, Job does appear to be an industrialist, an agricultural industrialist of his time. Because with all these animals, well, it says 500 yoke of oxen. That's actually 1,000 oxen yoked together, and these were work animals. So he had very possibly, let's see. I mean, a lot of land. Okay, thousands of acres of land. Very, very possibly he was working. So this is a guy. I mean, think of like the industrialists of today. He was very wealthy. He was very successful. And he was providing for his community. All right, so then we've got the next passage. Job talks about his family. Job's sons would take turns holding feasts in their homes, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of feasting were over, Job would send for his children to purify them, rising early in the morning to offer burnt offerings for all of them. For Job thought, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular practice. So we saw at the beginning that he's described as being blameless and upright. So the idea here is he was a man of integrity. Okay, what you see is what you get. He wasn't, he wasn't pretending to be something. He wasn't just playing, devout or religious or anything like that. He truly was a man of faith. He had integrity. He wasn't a hypocrite, and he was upright. He was a righteous man. He feared God, it says. In the scriptures, if you read the book of Proverbs, here's the definition of fearing God. Because some people may say, well, fear, that's not a good motivation. And this whole fearing God thing, I don't think that's a good way to live, just being afraid of God and his anger and his wrath and his punishment. That's not what fearing God means. The proverb writer put it perfectly. He said, to fear the Lord is to hate what is evil. And so there's perhaps some evil things that you absolutely hate. Think of some criminals and the things they do. I'm sure there are some things that you could easily say you hate those things. And that's what it means to fear God. It means to hate what is evil. And God is the one who defines good and evil. So, okay. And, well, it says fearing God and shunning evil. So now he hated evil and he shunned evil. All right. This is a very righteous man. Righteous and successful and wealthy. And, I mean, look, he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 10 kids. This is a big family. He's able to manage a large household. He and his wife, he was married. And we'll talk about that on another video. All right, so then we come to, I'll come back to his character, the quality of his character, his godliness. So we see here about his kids. So, his sons, they were hospitable. They weren't just like, hey, Dad, when you throwing a big feast? Like they were opening up their own homes. They were giving generously to one another, and they were taking turns. All of his sons, they would invite their sisters, so they're all enjoying meals together, sitting down as a family, etc., etc. Boy, some of these lasted days. Okay, days of feasting. Wow. All right, big weekend, right? Like the big weekend party, kind of like a 3-day holiday weekend, but on a regular basis. Now, here's the remarkable thing. It says that Job would send for his children to purify them. Now, why? Did they do something wrong? Did some of his kids is there a black sheep, or were they doing, just doing things they shouldn't be doing? No, it doesn't say that at all. Why did he want to purify his children? He thought, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. There was nothing that their kids had explicitly done wrong. He preemptively was thinking about how to protect his kids. As a parent, I can really relate to this. There are things that I do to sacrifice, that my wife and I have done to sacrifice for our kids, to protect them from a very young age. Whether it's investing in a safe car, the car seat, clothing that's not toxic, good, healthy food. If we drop them off somewhere, to make sure that, we do all the due diligence to make sure that they're going to be safe and cared for, protected, whether it's monetary or time or just concern. And so we see that Job, but here's the thing, we see that Job was that way, but he was that way about their spiritual condition, about their relationship with God, their faith. He didn't want them to be, even in their heart, and this is a good point here. Sin, he was concerned they may have cursed God and sinned in their heart. What do you think of as sin when you hear that word sin? Lying, being, just being a pig and pigging out, eating all the time, whatever, the 7 deadly sins, that sort of thing, committing crimes, cheating on a marriage, these different things. Absolutely. But sin doesn't just come out of nowhere. Where does sin start? It starts in the heart. Jesus talked about that in the Sermon on the Mount. And so Job understood something that Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, that a lot of people, was eye-opening to them when they heard it from Jesus. That, Jesus said, you heard it was said, don't murder. But I tell you, don't be angry with your brother. If you're angry with your brother, you've committed murder in your heart. So Job understood this, and he wanted to deal with sin at the root. He wasn't waiting for his kids to get to a point where there was already stuff, their hearts were in a bad place, and they were just ready to make some big, major, bad life decision. No, he was dealing with it at the root. And that's the kind of man that Job was. He had that kind of sensitivity that we read about here. So, now, these sacrifices would not have been like a small thing. We don't know exactly, but around that time, if I understand correctly, this type of sacrifice was, it wasn't just like, hey, throw something on the barbecue, give some to your neighbor and you eat the rest, that's your sacrifice, your peace offering to your neighbor. No, this is, supposedly was like the entire animal was offered up in a fire, okay, consumed by fire on an altar. And the thing is, it would have been expensive. It would have taken effort, and he was doing this on a regular basis, okay? So this was costing him money, this is costing him time, this is costing him manpower of the people who worked under him. And think of the sort of like weight on his mind and his heart to always be thinking about his kids, making sure that their hearts were right with God. Man, they were enjoying kind of a carefree, peaceful, joyful life. And he doesn't say he grumbled about that. He was happy. It seems like he was he seems to really support that. He's going out of his way to sacrifice for his kids, but he's the one sacrificing, and that's what parents do, right? But that's Job, guys. It's gonna get intense. The kitchen's gonna get hot, and anyway, I hope you find this interesting, and yeah, I mean, if you like the book of Job, if you don't like the book of Job, I'd be interested to know. All right, peace.